Good morning. Buenos dias. My name is Jeffrey Melcher, one of your worship leaders today. On behalf of worship producer Vincent Rains, the Crescendo Choir, and our speakers, Emily Stoper, Patsy Wood, Janet McFarland, and Sherry Weston Vigil, welcome. Welcome to worship with First Unitarian Church of Oakland. Please turn your camera off while we begin our service and light our chalice and candles. This will allow us to begin with a quiet space. You are invited to light a chalice in your own home as well. We will turn our cameras on to greet each other later in the service. For best viewing experience, we recommend that you make certain you have the up-to-date version of the Zoom app on your computer.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Lucia Savage. I'm a member of the Board of Trustees, and I'm really glad that you've joined us here for worship this morning. For those of you who don't know me, I've been a member of this church since 1985, which feels like a really wonderful length of time to be in community, and that is what we're going to talk about today. I was really touched by the song that we played, because that's one of my favorite songs in the hymnal, and I love the line, please look down and see my people through, because that's what building community is all about. A little bit about us. We're an intentionally multi-generational, multiracial, multicultural, inclusive, and anti-oppressive religious community, and you are welcome here. We invite you to fill out the guest connection card, which you'll see the link for in the chat, and we want to be able to support your exploration of what's available in our community that interests you and how you might participate with us in our community. Welcome. Now, before we begin, I do have a few reminders and announcements. Today at noon, the Circle of Oak will convene for an hour of tea, good company, and learning about topics relevant to witchcraft and other earth-centering spiritual paths. Get the Zoom link by emailing circleofoak@uuoakland.org. Next Saturday, August 14th at 5:30 p.m., a Black, Indigenous, and People of Color worship service and social will be occurring. For those of you with the lived experience of being Black, Indigenous, or a person of color, you're invited to attend along with spouses, children, and chosen family of any race. If you are a BIPOC or mixed race and do not have an invitation, or if you have any questions, please email jtw@uuoakland.org. And finally, August 25th at 7 p.m., there's a coming of age program meeting. For information, please contact Nicole, Nicole, at uuoakland.org. As always, you can find out more on our website, uuoakland.org/calendar, or in the Chalice Chatter. Now I'm going to introduce you to Janet McFarland, who will kick off our service.
Good morning. We light our chalice this morning with words from Judith L. Quarles, A Community of Faith. At this hour, in small towns and big cities, in single rooms and ornate sanctuaries, many of our sibling Unitarian Universalist congregations are also lighting a flaming chalice. As we light our chalice today, let us remember that we are part of a great community of faith. May this dancing flame inspire us to fill our lives with the Unitarian Universalist ideals of love, justice, and truth. Now we light our red candle. We light this candle in recognition of the Black Lives Matter movement. We commit to dismantling with daily action the systemic racism that tries to deny the full humanity of Black people. And now Jeff will give us a reading.
Today's reading is from a book called To Community. And this reading is from the prologue by the Reverend Rebecca Parker. 19th century Universalists were also keen about a vision of human connectedness, beginning with a theological affirmation of God's universal love. Universalism called its adherents to an all-embracing love for human beings. Thomas Whitmore, a universalist writing at the middle of the 19th century, speaks with fervor of this imperative. See then, there is a common bond, a tie, uniting the vast family of man and woman and non-gendered. No circumstance of birth or color, no misfortune, no oppression, neither poverty nor vice, nor disgrace nor death can sunder it. Who, believing and realizing this, can be unkind? Who can be entirely engrossed in his own welfare? Who can be the oppressor of his brethren? Who can be deaf to the moan of the sufferer, to the plaintive entreaty of the poor? In the 20th century, we have witnessed tragic denials of our dependence on one another and on the planet. And we are experiencing the consequences in the Holocaust, World War II, in the slashing and burning of rainforests, in contemporary American societies, hostility toward the poor. We hear voices say, "I have no need of you. You have no claim on me." The consequences of this denial of our dependence include violence, a loss of quality of life marked by civility and respect, increased insularity, suffering, and diminishment of our souls, and a planet at risk of environmental collapse. At the same time, a deepened renewal conception is emerging of the reality that we are bound together in one bundle of life. Process theology expounds on the relational, organic character of life and denies that anything exists apart from relational interdependence with the whole of life. Systems theory, postmodern physics, and the biology of ecosystems all enforce a relational vision. Feminist theology critically deconstructs the image of separate selfhood and emphasizes that we are made from this earth. We recognize that commitment to right relationship is critically important for the survival of life. We know this is a religious issue, and we recognize that our circle of concern must extend to the interdependence of all life. We cannot focus religion in the realm of the personal and private alone, or be concerned only with the sustaining of religious communities in which people minister to one another. We must give our attention to the public sphere, the whole of life. Our religious calling is grounded in life itself, life that calls out to be cherished and sustained in patterns of justice and love. In these times, liberal faith has a peculiar responsibility. Given its openness and belief in the interdependence of people, the church is a splendid site for the encouragement of religious citizenship. That is to say, an activism attached to a deep sense of religious faith. As we begin to jump into the flow of this service, I want to voice some words about today's service, Community Voices. There is a common thread that runs through this service from several community voices. 4 homilies, but no sermon. Members of our community sharing from their mind and heart what is personally true and meaningful. 1, a thread of a path, inviting elders to embrace both power of engagement to the end, as well as knowing when to pass the torch to a younger generation. Another share is about being on the path in a committed covenant group, ministering to each other. 2 members are reporting back from the Unitarian Universalist Association's General Assembly, our annual national gathering for business, policy, justice making, and spirituality, particularly addressing our growing commitment to anti-racism. I invite all of us to follow these threads into community by staying in organized and pop-up conversations, both fun and difficult. I invite you to gather these threads this morning and weave an interconnected path of justice for ourselves, our community, and all life on the planet. Why? Because the time for simplifying the problems or the answers is over. We can and must challenge ourselves to hear and see the interconnectedness where it has not been heard or seen. Not just to be woke, but to be waking. We, white and Black Indigenous people of color, together on a journey. Never finished until we are dead, yet engaging in life to continue our awakening process. With our hearts and minds, I call us to embrace all the voices in our community, to listen to a deep call from each other and the earth to awaken our senses and to heed the cry. I invite you to rise in body or spirit, to sing along at home with your microphone muted. Hymn number 298 from the silver and gray hymnal, Wake Now My Senses, led by the First Unitarian Church of Oakland Chancel Choir. Sing as if you mean it.
I'm Emily Stoper. I'm one of your community voices today. I've been a member of the church for over 20 years, and I'm the person to contact if you want to join a covenant group. And I'm active in the church in many other ways. And now we come to the part of our church where you can unmute your microphones, turn on your cameras, and greet each other.
Hello, Emily. Hello, Greg.
Hello, Marilyn. Hello, Sarah.
Good morning,
Hi,
Emily.
Dick Bailey.
Morning.
Hi,
Cora.
Morning,
Yeah.
Laurel.
See everybody.
Hi, it's good to see everybody.
Jan.
Hi, you
Cora.
guys.
Hi, Jody.
Marcy.
Marcy.
Hello, Marilyn.
Hi, Andrea.
Carol.
Hi, Hess.
Sarah. Hi there. Hi, Carol.
Morning, everybody.
Hi, Dennis.
Hi, Marcy.
Hi, Carol.
Hi Carol.
Hi, Bill. How are you? Hi, Janet.
Hi, Evelyn. Hi, Marilyn.
Hi, Mary Jane.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Tasha.
Donna. Hi, Janet. Patsy. Alicia. Emily and
Hey,
Judith.
good morning, Carol.
Wow.
Hi, Dennis.
Hi, Harold
Hi.
and Janet.
Hi.
Guys.
Hi,
Hi
Dick.
there.
MJ, there
Not
you
quite
are.
sure how I
Oh, hi, MJ.
Hi, Amy. Hi, MJ.
Jody.
Marilyn and Sarah.
Hi, Amy.
Judith, Donna,
Hi.
Stuart,
Hi, Bill.
Hi, Dick.
How are you, Liz?
and Kevin, Jody, Laurel, Eggenberger,
Hi,
Carol.
Jody. Hi, Darn.
This is so much fun.
Hi,
John
Let's go back.
Hi.
Let's go hear a wisdom story from
Hi,
Jeff.
And a wisdom story today from a Tapestry of Faith curriculum for youth. This is part of a chorus of faiths. Interfaith cooperation was in evidence over a century ago at the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago, also known as the World's Fair, in 1893. The fair was the world's first major theme park, offering the first Ferris wheel rides and introducing popular treats such as juicy fruit gum and Cracker Jack caramel-coated popcorn. The World's Fair also inspired another first, an unprecedented gathering of leaders from religious traditions all over the world, in part organized by Unitarian minister Jenkins Lloyd Jones. From the very beginning, Unitarian Universalists have been at the forefront of interfaith cooperation. Before he organized the Parliament, Jenkins Lloyd Jones was simply a minister with a conviction that there was an underlying unity among all religions. Trusting in his vision, he rented a hall on the south side of Chicago, where he shared his dream. With your help and cooperation, we will start here a new church to be the church of all souls. Jones' son, Richard, continued the legacy by founding All Souls Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma, currently the largest Unitarian Universalist congregation in the United States. The Chicago Church of All Souls provided social services to the surrounding community. Jones also developed interfaith relationships with other local, liberal, religious leaders to assist in this work. When the World's Fair was held in Chicago in 1893, Jones saw the opportunity to convene a parallel event with religious leaders from all over the world, called the World's Parliament of Religion. Through the Parliament, and though the Parliament almost overwhelmed the planners, Jones' vision and inspirational sermons helped sustain their enthusiasm. A spirit of novelty and curiosity infused the event. Most American Protestants had never before encountered non-Christian religions, so the pageantry of the waving national flags and the stunning appearance of many of the participants was a sensation. An official history showed over 100 photographs of places of worship in lands far from the United States and people clothed in ways unfamiliar to Americans, such as the eloquent monk Vivekananda of Bombay, clad in gorgeous red apparel, his bronze face surmounted with a huge turban of yellow. With his characteristic confidence, Jones described in his book, A Chorus of Faith. It was plain to see that the priests and preachers on the platform of Columbus Hall were having an exceedingly good time. The soul had escaped its conventional fetters, laid aside its ecclesiastical trumpery, and had gone out to play in the open fields of God. The spirits of men and women were out walking in the hilltops of human nature. They were having a good time because they all had escaped barriers and fetters peculiar to them. The Parliament, if it has proved nothing else, has proved what a splendid thing human nature is to build a religious fellowship upon. Though Jones believed in a unity among religions, the Parliament's success did not depend on participants sharing that belief. Instead, it rested on members of diverse traditions knowing their differences, but still committing to work together. This incredible vision that people of different beliefs, practices, and perspectives could come together to solve the ills of the world underlies interfaith work today. And now we hear from the first of our community voices. Emily Stoper will speak to us about aging across generations.
Hi, everyone. I've been aging all my life, but now that I'm 78, I'm finally taking the subject seriously. I'm lucky enough to still be in the stage of the young old, but I have to stop kidding myself. It won't last forever. Eventually, I'll be one of those old, meaning I won't be able to take care of myself any longer. Most of us learn a lot about aging from the older generations in our family. First, we observe our grandparents and then our parents as they move through the stages of their lives. When our parents become old, it's our turn to help them in practical and emotional ways and to hold their hands as they move toward the end of life. Hopefully, our kids will notice us doing that. There's a terrific UU writer named Mary Pfeiffer who wrote a wonderful book called Another Country about this process, this stage of life. She says that offering this support to our aging parents is one of the central tasks of our life. As a therapist, Mary Pfeiffer observed that this work gave deep emotional rewards, and this is interesting, even for people who'd been estranged from their parents for years. And doing this work is how many of us learn to face the prospect of our final years of aging. Her book was really helpful to me as I was helping my own parents get through their old years. And it helps me as I look ahead now. So you've probably noticed that up to now, I've been assuming some kind of idealized traditional model of the family as a lineage of people who are close and caring. Well, this model never really fit all families in this country. But in the 21st century, it's true for even fewer families. Nowadays, our need for education and jobs may move us thousands of miles away from our families of origin. And besides that, Immigration may mean that children are culturally distant from their parents or from their children. And more people never have children, or their adult children aren't up to the job of helping them, and neither are their more distant younger relatives. So what do? We create friendship networks. Sometimes these are more lasting and more satisfying than family relationships. And we may turn to religious communities like this one. First, think of our rites of passage in this congregation. Marriages, child dedications, coming of age programs, bridging ceremonies, celebrations of life. These rituals add meaning and deep satisfaction to the aging process, and they strengthen the links between generations. On a more practical level, covenant groups and other affinity groups and pastoral care can step in and help. A few years ago, my covenant group gave a massive amount of pastoral care to one of our family members, one of our covenant group members who had no family or close friends, and who suddenly learned that she was dying. Pastoral associates also helped this woman. This experience gave many of us some of the same valuable experiences that taking care of dying relatives would have. And it certainly made a huge difference to our friend. Let me add that it's not just religious communities that sustain and supplement family networks. It's all manner of groupings. An uncle of mine who lived back east was sustained in his last months of life by two groups of people, members of the Ethical Culture Society and the guys at his neighborhood bar. Watching my older friends and relatives, as well as the young people I know, makes me think about the course of my own life and to see the ways that I'm still the same person in spite of all the changes. I've always loved this poem by Wordsworth, in which he considers the ways our emotional experiences bind together our young selves and our older selves. So here's the poem. My heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky. So was it when my life began. So is it now I am a man. So be it when I shall grow old, or let me die. The child is father of the man, and I could wish my days to be bound each to each by natural piety. Finally, I want to say that as I pass through the stages of life, and especially as I approach the stage of old, I'm sustained by another longer view of my life and of generations. I'm thinking more about my ancestors, going back to the dawn of the human species, and much earlier to my many non-human forebears. That makes me feel closer to all people and to all animals too. My individual life feels very important to me on one level, of course, but I'm increasingly aware that it's just a blip in the continuing saga of all life. I'm learning to see my own aging and even my own eventual death in the perspective of many generations, past and future. I have to grow older and eventually to die so that future generations can keep recreating the world. I try to live in a way that extends the best values of the generations that came before me and that leaves a better world for the generations that will follow. And now I'm going to pass the torch to Patsy Wood, one of our covenant group leaders.
Hi, everybody. I am Patsy Wood, and I am currently the facilitator of one of our covenant groups. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what the covenant group has meant to me. I went to my first service at the church in the winter of 2009. I had just moved into downtown Oakland, and I was attracted to the church by a banner on the roof that read, "Out of the War in Iraq." I figured any church that had such a banner was a church I wanted to attend. When I entered that first Sunday, the service was in progress, and a very nice couple took out a hymnal so I could follow along as we sang. I was really touched by their kindness. But after the service, when I ventured into Vente Hall, I found myself completely overwhelmed by the crowds of strangers talking and greeting each other. A little later, when I learned about the existence of covenant groups, I immediately signed up to join one. I was nervous attending my first meeting, but figured I could just check it out. That was sometime in 2009. I remember the group went out of their way to make me feel welcome, as each member told me a little bit about themselves in addition to their check-in. I remember feeling really comfortable in the group, and it has become a kind of home for me ever since. And this is our practice. When new members join our group, we always take time to do more elaborate introductions so that they feel welcomed, invited in and welcomed. We want the new member to learn more about who we are, so they hopefully feel free to share a bit about who they are. Our protocol each month is generally to check in the first half of the meeting, take a short break, and have refreshments. This was before COVID, and then discuss the theme of the month, the second half of the group. As I continued attending our meetings, I found it so helpful each month to hear how folks were doing and what they were going through in their lives. Often in hearing what others were dealing with, I could identify with their struggles as well. This gave me an important perspective on my own difficulties and how to cope with them. Just having folks listen can lighten our load. But the other important aspect of our check-ins involves sharing our triumphs over the month. Much of the time, these can be little things, but in sharing them with others, it makes them more palpable. There is something exciting about celebrating accomplishments of our members together. The entire experience gives me such a perspective on living, the challenges, the triumphs, and the cherishing of small but important things in our lives. The second half of our group, we talk about the UU theme of the month. Often we have quotes on the topic that stimulate our own thoughts and associations to the themes. The UU themes are often lofty and beautiful, such as deep listening, stillness, commitment, healing, renewal, but they can also be very down to earth. We recently spent our time talking about play, how we play, and how important this is for us. This past month, we read quotes from Mr. Rogers and talked about kindness and decency. Our monthly group has gone through many changes over the years. Some members have come and gone, while others have joined us and stayed. Our initial leader, Noemi, led with such kindness and generosity. And then when she left, Sherry Larson-Bevel and I took over as co-facilitators, switching off and leading the group. During the pandemic, we have been on Zoom, and I have taken over to send out Zoom links. At first, Zoom felt odd as we missed meeting each other in person. But as we've acclimated to it, the group has come to feel as intimate now as it ever was. It's just so good to see everyone each month. And I've even finally figured out how to post our covenant on Zoom. So what has the covenant group meant to me? Many things. First, it has offered a more intimate space to get to know members of our community and to feel more connected to the greater UU community. We've gone through so many things together. A number of our members retired a few years back, and as we shared about our own journey in retirement, we could hear how others were coping with this big transition in their lives. Health issues have also been a prominent theme in our check-ins, many of us suffering with various illnesses, disabilities, and conditions that we are coping with. Hearing about members' plans and trips and the ways they are contributing and giving back to the UU community has been very moving to me as well. What I can say is that the Covenant Group is a rich experience, a place where we are reminded we are part of a greater community and that we are not alone, a place where we can see that what we are going through is not unique, but shared by our common humanity. The Covenant Group can also be fun. A number of years ago, one of our members got married and invited our whole group, so we attended the wedding and it was just a blast. One of the activities we did at the wedding was taking folk dancing lessons, which was really, really fun. We look forward to returning to in-person meetings someday when COVID is no longer such a threat. But in the meantime, we have each other each month and a place to call home.
In the tradition of meditation and prayer, as is the custom of this congregation, we enter a time of embracing meditation. We lift up the memory of our former congregant Bob Schultz, who died peacefully at his home this past week. We send love to his wife, Gail. And please hold with great love and care in your hearts, Marcia and Keith Krayek, who are grieving the news of their son Philip's death. Philip had been missing for more than 3 weeks when, sadly, after extensive searching by police agencies and numerous community volunteers, his body was found Tuesday in the area where he had gone running a different route than usual. This is a very sad and tragic loss for his parents, his wife, and his 2 young children, and all who knew him. As more information becomes available about how the congregation might support the Krajek family, we will share it through the Chalice Chatter. Let us hold in our hearts the people of our planet who are suffering from COVID, climate disasters. Let us hold friends and loved ones in our care for deep losses of family, of friends, transitioning parents into care facilities, to recognize how accidents change our lives both temporarily and permanently. And in all, remember there is always hope, that love and beauty are all around us, waiting to be seen and shared even in the midst of loss. Here I would like to share a quote from Jen Yao, the wife of Philip. Hug your families, because you really never know what happens. Please take care of each other. Let us practice creating love and visualizing giving it while we listen to and sing along at home, Give a Little Love by Ziggy Marley and the Melody Makers, performed by First Unitarian Church of Oakland Crescendo Choir.
We've got to give a little love, have a little hope, make this world a little better. Try a little more, harder than before, just do it, we can do it together. Oh, we can really make it better. Oh, la, 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 only if we try. Oh, we can really make it better. Oh, la, 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 only if we try. Living in this crazy world, so caught up in the confusion, nothing is making sense for me and you. Maybe we can find a way, there's got to be solution, how to make a brighter day. What do? We've got to give a little love, have a little hope, make this world a little better. Try a little more, harder than before, just do it, we can do it together. Oh, we can really make it better. Oh, la, 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 only if we try. Oh, we can really make it better. Oh, la, 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 only if we try. Only if we try. Only if we try.
Hi, I'm Sherry Weston Behan, and you probably know that I was one of the delegates to go to GA this year. The other person was Janet McFarland, and we've had a lot of chats about what we got out of being a part of this very important one. As you know, GA happens once every year, and it's really important, I think, that now we've been there, we're talking about the 8th principle, there's been a huge focus on diversity in a way that Unitarian Universalism, since the 80s when I started, has really improved. And there's work to do, big time. And so I thought it was an interesting time to explain in general why I think it's so important that Foucault get more involved at the national level, and especially here in the Pacific region, where we can be a part of how things are for this whole area. and to work more with the congregations that are in our immediate zone here in the Bay. I have in front of me here a booklet that I created that is to let us know when we get together more details about what I learned at the workshops that I participated in, and there were a couple that I actually presented at. There were things like call to prison abolition, indigenous justice, building resilience through staffing innovations, beloved conversations, learning and liberation. One of the ones that I was involved in was called Beyond the Gender Binary and Recovery Housing. That was about having inclusive, gender non-binary services in the recovery units. So the typical thing does not, in the public, have this chance of including people who are not going to stick with the so-called typical identities. So I was a part of that with Reverend Ruth Reinhardt and Reverend Lynn Hopkins. Then there was the BIPOC Unitarian Universalist Oral History Project overview, mental health support for grief and trauma. My other one was called Multiracial Family Strength and Resiliency, which is about mixed families. One of the workshops that really excited me that I participated in was called Explicitly Including Islam in Our Traditions. And I didn't realize that the person who was responsible for trying to get the Unitarian piece, I knew he was assassinated by that ugly way they used to do things. But what I didn't know is he had a very strong Islam tradition behind his thinking. And so that we're thinking about being inclusive. We haven't been inclusive enough of those kinds of traditions. That's one of the things that we have a workshop on that's available to us. It's available to us because there's going to be a portal open to the public. Right now, the UUA is organizing by checking with each presenter to make sure it's okay to include their material in what's going to be public. And my strong suggestion is that Foucault spend some time with Janet and I and get recommendations on some things that we can either use in services or actually break up into a couple of pieces that we could use at coffee hour type discussions. There was a ton of diversity in the presentations and who presented. That famous Stacey Abrams from Georgia, who's been so important in us paying attention to voting rights in this country. That was one of the main speakers. We did a good job. And what I'm hoping is that we can take advantage here in the Bay Area with the other congregations to take advantage of those learnings, to participate more in our region, as I said, to participate more nationally, as I've included in my comment, because there's a lot going on that could be picked up on. The music was unbelievably wonderful, everything I heard, and I didn't have time to see it all. So I know that we have resources, at least to be able to add more of this in our own services, not always using local people, but there sure are local people here as well, to be speakers, to present music, and to spend time with our welcoming committee and with our committee that does the services. The last little note I'd like to make has to do with the person who is running against the person running for the board of the UUA who did not want the eighth principle. The eighth principle would be inclusive in a way that talks about reparations. In my view, that's what it's partly about. And there is actually UUs working against that. We at Foucault have a way of thinking of things and doing things that can be contributive to making these things better, as we're planning to do nationally. So my suggestion is that we, as I said, pick up on this material that's going to be available to us for free, as far as I know, locally, and build from that. We won't have to always pay speakers. We have some of that material available to us. Thank you for voting for me to go and helping me go. And I'm hoping to be helpful in the process as we pursue.
Thank you for that overview, Sherry. I wish you were here for the whole service. Good morning, community. Along with Sherry, I was a delegate for our church to General Assembly. I volunteered because through my involvement with the adoption of the eighth principle, I learned about the organized opposition to the eighth principle. There was a contested board position, as Sherry mentioned, and I wanted to do my part to make sure to elect the progressive candidate, Scott Trumbore. When I was puzzling about what to share this morning, I asked a friend, "What would you like to know about GA?" He thought for a moment, then responded, "Is it fun?" Well, I know I'm pretty much of a geek, but that took me by surprise. Some of you know that my idea of fun is to race into the sunrise and the encroaching pandemic to hang out at the top of the world with a group of goddess-mad mystics. I think an in-person GA might be fun, seeing friends from around the country, being tourists in New Orleans or some other unfamiliar place. I'm sure there are normally lots of activities to participate in that aren't about policy and business. If fun was on offer this year, I did not find it. But as Sherry mentioned, there were so many resources that I did not find hardly any of them. I just barely tapped the surface. This was my first GA. After 15 months of COVID, virtual GA was right up my alley. Sherry and I figured out how to attend and how to vote. Scott Trumbore was elected, receiving over 90% of delegate votes. And over the 5 days, I did manage to participate some. The many amazing materials will be available to all in September. Sherry and I both participated in a forum where amendments to the proposed statement of conscience regarding the UU commitment to dismantling white supremacy were being considered. Sherry put forward an amendment which was incorporated into the final statement. The statement is very lengthy, so I'll just share a few highlights. It's called Undoing Systemic White Supremacy, a call to prophetic action. Seeking universal justice and equity, we call upon the Unitarian Universalist Association and Unitarian Universalist individuals and congregations and groups to actively engage in undoing systemic white supremacy in all of its manifestations, to engage with the movement in our communities and the nation to heal the evils of racism, to carry forward the recommended healing actions conveyed in widening the circle of concern, to build relationships across boundaries of privilege and oppression, to fulfill our UU role as spiritual anchor to BIPOC UUs. This statement, challenging as it is, was approved by 97% of GA attendees. For the full text, you can see the link in the chat. Ever since a major blow-up at GA in 2017, the UUA has been engaged in tremendous self-examination on many levels, hopefully leading to a reset of the foundation of our denomination. That is my hope. As Paula Cole-Jones, standard bearer for the adoption of the eighth principle, observed, there are two paradigms in UUism side by side, the UU principles and the beloved community, which means deep multiculturalism achieved through reconciliation. One paradigm lives comfortably with the seven principles without thinking about or dealing with racism or other oppressions in the systemic level. The other paradigm is stretching for beloved community and cannot be satisfied with the status quo, which is complicity and complacency with white supremacy. I'm inspired by Paula and by the movement for the eighth principle. Vince, could you bring up the slide showing the statement? There you go. So people can read it for you. It says, we, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. That's a mouthful. I'm motivated by the reports of terrible harm members and clergy of color have experienced in our churches and institutions. I've taken it on as a champion against that harm and a champion for something better. For me, it is spiritual work. It's spiritual work because, as with the exploration of abolishing or defunding the police, which we engaged in last week, I don't know what is the right or the best thing for us. I don't know, and it may not be clear during my lifetime whether the movement has transformed Unitarian Universalism or not. But the discussion might touch everyone, and like Ice 9, Kurt Vonnegut's invention, it might ultimately change the entire chemistry of our existence. The eighth principle is a movement to turn our beloved principles from a nice touchstone to a verb. It stretches me. I don't know how to say it strongly enough. I was raised from childhood to figure out the right answer, to know it before everyone else, and to show that I knew it. This, I was trained, would keep me safe. Safe like a child tiptoeing past a sleeping giant that has many conditions for allowing my survival and suppresses my thriving. I want my own liberation from the fear I spoke of. Pastor Teresa inspires me to pursue liberation by exploring my dream, by challenging the fears that keep me small. I have the incredible good fortune to be in this denomination with you at this pivotal historical time. I dream of following this pull inside, this yearning not to be right, but for rightness in my world. Our longing, our seeking will surely bring answers into being. And maybe those new answers will save the planet and create a utopian world. In my dreams, but I can dream, and I do. I hope you will join us next year at GA. Together, we at First UU Oakland can work with the Unitarian Universalist Association to move toward liberation and the fulfillment of our prophetic mission. And maybe we can have some fun too. Thank you.
This congregation can be a core support for all of us as we go through life. You may meet your mate here and many friends besides. If you have children, it can help raise them. It's a place to celebrate your joyful life passages. It can help you when you face troubles and sorrows. You can work with people here to make your ideals more real in the wider community and in the world. And our beautiful building can be your second home. None of this can happen without your generous financial contributions, which mostly pay the salaries of our minister and our wonderful staff. The more you give, the more you and others will receive. So please look at the guide on your screen to all the ways you can give. And I invite you to be as generous as you possibly can.
From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and by this we live. From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and by this we live.
And now please join me in saying the words of our congregational commitment. To the work of the church,
which
which is weaving a tapestry of love we call community, we dedicate ourselves and these
our
our offerings. And now, please sing along with this recording of the song, Our World is One World.
The world awaits, waiting and wanting us to be our full selves, woke and waking to the needs of each other and the interdependent web of our being. May we continue to embrace our voices, our personal spiritual paths, even as we weave our paths together in a community voice. As we go forth into our week and the days of mid-August, may we find peace in the simple pleasures of listening to each other and listening to the earth, gathering the threads of community, voices, and weaving an interconnected path of justice and joy. May it be so. Amen. Amin. Ashe. Blessed be.